Hello, I am Juno, and in continuation from Ira's discussion, I will now discuss the DH parametric table. The DH parametric table, from the name itself, shows the parameters a manipulator can have for each row, which is the number of frames a manipulator has minus 1. The parameters that we will use will be theta, alpha, r, and d. The first row, which is this, refers to both frame 0, and frame 1. The definition of these parameters when constructing DH parametric table will be shown in the picture. In frame 0 and frame 1, the rotation around the axis of z sub 1 that can make x sub 1 match with x sub 0 will be the value of theta in terms of degrees. If we look at the kinematic diagram that is shown, we can see that the both x sub 0 and x sub 1 is pointing at the same direction, which means that there is no rotation required to match them. Thus, the value of theta will be 0 degrees. If frame 1 and 0 contain a twisting or bullet joint, the value of theta should add or include the joint variable, and in this case, it will be theta, since there is no rotation required to match both x-axis. The value of theta for this first row will be 0 degrees plus theta 1 or theta sub 1. The next parameter is parameter alpha. And instead of rotating x along z-axis, we will now rotate z sub 0 along the x-axis to match z sub 1. Looking again at frame 0 and frame 1, we can see that we can rotate z sub 0 90 degrees counterclockwise to match z sub 1. So we will put 90 degrees in the column of parameter alpha. Note that in these cases where frames were translated in certain axes, where both frames have intersected, the next parameter is parameter r. Parameter r will be the distance of the origins between two frames in x sub n axis, and in this case, it will be x sub 1. Note that in these cases, where frames were translated in certain axes, where both frames have intersected, the distance will be 0 as well. So we will put 0 in column R. The last parameter D. Parameter D will be the distance of origins of frame 1 and 0 in between of z sub n minus 1 with z sub n in the axis of z sub n minus 1. As per the kinematic diagram, we can see that z sub 1 and z sub 0 are pointing in different direction, which means that there is a distance present between them, and the distance is the link length itself written at the side. The value of D for row 1 will be A1. By carefully following these steps for each succeeding row, by carefully following these steps for each succeeding row, we were able to have a complete DH parametric table. This should be a sub 1. It should look like this.